Just a couple of introductory remarks before we look at the film. Denken aan Holland was about 7 years old, and its director is a specialist on documentaries, and he focuses primarily on the visual arts. And because of that, and Reichen is his last name, because of that, I want to just kind of set the film up for you a little bit. And to do that, I have to tell you about the subject. It's not just thinking about Holland, it's addressing a particular river in Holland, okay? The Waal River. And that river extends from Maastricht, which is right on the German border, and it goes all the way across the Netherlands until it reaches Rotterdam. And it's an important thoroughway between the North Sea and then the Meuse in Germany, or ultimately it's going to reconnect back with the Rhine. So this is a very important riverway. The name Waal, or Waal, it isn't connected to this thing, okay? It means crooked in Dutch. So it's a crooked river. And the film is going to be addressing that in ways. Okay, so you're going to feel like you're kind of meandering down the river at points. And one other comment before we see this film that I think is really important to help us appreciate it is he's not preoccupied with just giving you an illustration of river life. Okay, this is not some passive description. Instead, he wants to present this place in a kind of a poetic way, or a rhetorical way, a way of trying to persuade you to think or to meditate. In other words, he's trying to be self-consciously artistic about this, and in doing so, he's connecting it with earlier art, 17th century art. And I don't want to sort of let the cat out of the bag early on, so instead what I'd like you to do when you're watching this is think about the qualities of the river, okay, and the different nuances, the subtleties of experiencing that. Because what he's going to do in the film is start us out in Germany and then take us all the way out to Rotterdam. So it's like a little boat trip we're going on tonight. Okay, but you're not going to literally feel like you're on a boat. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit, again, more playful than that. At times, I'll be honest, when I saw it this afternoon, you know, there's times where it's slow, but that's what it's like when you're going through a river too. So, you know, bear that in mind and try to get a sense of the place as you watch this. So without further ado, you survived the 50-mile ride. When you watch this film, I asked you to sort of think of the qualities of the river or the place. And to start off the discussion, what kind of qualities did you think of? What kind of struck you? Gentle, yeah. And that's one of the things that makes it hard to talk about this thing, right? Because it is so quiet, so tranquil. I decided to kind of, well, help us out a little bit in that, you know, it's easy for me to kind of flip back and do something 17th century. But in a way, they were too. And so I'm going to just show you a couple of images made in the 17th century. This is of Nijmegen, and that's the Waal River right there in front of it. Okay? And so when you look at this painting by Jan van Gooyen, in some ways it's naturalistic. In other ways it's quite abstract. I mean, you're seeing the horizon, then it's a simple diagonal coming up into space. And in some ways we saw artists doing things like that. The other quality, though, and I think this is where you're spot on, is it's incredibly tranquil. There's that sense of serenity to this place. And that's one of the qualities that is deeply appreciated in the 17th century, and it continues. It's like one of the other qualities that I think we can think about here is there was the female artist who was preoccupied with white and black and the subtleties of color. This is a tonal painting. It's for the most part monochromatic, but you're thinking of, again, the nuances, the subtle differences within the color. And that's, again, that kind of poetic response that's being elicited through the painting. It's not dramatic in the way we expect from, you know, American films or American art, but here's another example. I don't know if you recall this. Maybe this will help you remember, since it's Remembering Holland. We'll make it Remembering the Film. When we looked back at that, what a lot of those artists were doing, I'm hoping you remember now. I mean, the strong sense of cows everywhere, it seemed like. And that's kind of an odd thing. Why this fascination with cows? This might surprise you, but in many ways the cow is analogous to the bald eagle in America. It's a strong symbol of Dutch nationalism. It really is. And you find this all over the place. And it resonates in the 17th century, and then you see it again pop up in contemporary art quite frequently, this close proximity between the cow, land, water. Cows is something that we associate with getting lots of goods. You know, leather's coming from that, meat, cheese, milk, and so it has that quality. There are lots of sayings in Dutch about making sure you protect your cows, to be vigilant. I know this sounds strange, but that's the reality. And I mean, even in English, you know, we have when we think of the word good, good can mean something that's moral, but when we're talking about a river, goods are the things going down that river. And they intertwine those things. So you're finding even kind of religious or moralizing language too that was brought into the play here. I don't know if you kind of caught that with some of these artists. And that's not necessarily saying that they're devout in a particular faith, but there is this sensibility associated with, again, it's going to sound strange, but it's like the Netherlands is not the land of milk and honey, but the land of milk and cheese. Okay, I mean, there is something kind of, again, nationalistics may be the wrong term here, because it's like hometown pride or regional appreciation that we're seeing in relationship to these places. It's a locality, but at the same time, when you look at those paintings or you look at this one, you're not exactly always sure where you're seeing. You know, so it has this sense of immediacy, of being particular, and then simultaneously more open-ended. You know, it's like if you could make a painting of, for the sake of argument here, generic New Jersey that everybody would like, but they could never pinpoint where exactly in New Jersey it was. Okay, that's kind of like what you're seeing here. Okay, there's a church, and then art historians will argue about, well, where is it located on the basis of what that church looks like. But for the most part, what people would be seeing is the boat and these cows. And these are made for an open market, just like the 21st and 20th century artworks that we saw tonight were made. You know, so anyway, these are just kind of things to think about as you're looking at this. I hope this is helping. Do you have questions or thoughts come to mind?
It seemed like there was a lot of grayness. Was that simply a time of year, or that just a standard environmental?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And here's why it's a really good one. It functions in two ways. One is, yes, predominantly the sky is going to be gray. The Netherlands does have quite a bit of rainfall and so forth, and yes, the seasons, as you could tell, was done in an area, a time when how should I put it? You're seeing late fall, early winter in a lot of these scenes, right? And so, yes, the climate's going to be like that, or the environment. But in addition to this, and this is where the artsy side comes through, and it's a little bit esoteric, I think, for an American audience, but the Dutch would catch it immediately, is, okay, I'm going to backtrack here. Vincent van Gogh. Everybody knows Vincent van Gogh in here, right? Okay, Vincent van Gogh studied under a group called the Hague School in English. And the Hague School were known in the Netherlands during the late 19th century as the Gray School. And the idea was to try to make as much of a poetic response to nature, or to utilize the color gray in all its sort of nuances in order to elicit contemplation. And they tend to be rural scenes like this. So where I'm showing you the 17th century examples, the reason why I think your question's so good is you have 19th century painters who are going after the 17th century, and they're doing the same thing. So there's this really long tradition. So gray is associated with contemplation, and the pictures that Vincent van Gogh is looking at in the Netherlands and studying under so forth were basically impressionistic. But to give you impressions of cows and rivers and all the kind of things I'm showing you. The French impressionists hated it. And they hated it precisely because it was so gray. They associated that more with being drab or as being gloomy. But in Dutch culture, it need not have that connotation. I don't know what that says about the Dutch, but especially since I'm one of them. But it's not thought of as pessimistic.
No, you know, some of those earlier paintings, particularly there was a couple that were had the rows of, I assume they were the poplars that were stood out because of their starkness, but also because of their deepness in color compared to the gray, and sometimes slight brown, but that gray wash had so many different not textures, but tones to it. It wasn't just a gray wall or a white wall like we're seeing here.
Exactly, and that's what they appreciate in terms of having a kind of pictorial intelligence. That it isn't just, when we think of gray, we have a tendency of thinking something that's uniform. And to be able to take that and draw out various textures or, well, how should I put this, even maybe perspectival qualities to it, making it seem volumetric, or to create a psychological response from that is, well, difficult. And the challenge that's elicited in that is precisely what these artists are trying to address. That's good, yeah.
Can you talk about the artists that were selected?
Tell you the truth, I can't. Okay, and I say that because I'm not a 20th century expert by any stretch of the imagination, but also the first time I saw this film was today. I saw it twice, and I don't know why he chose these particular artists. I'm guessing because they're locals. They are not well known. The poems that he chose, I mean, especially the last one, is a pretty well known early, mid 20th century poem. And so they're reciting a well-known poem together, but the rest of it is local.
I was struck by the possibility that most of them seem to stay in one place, painting not one view, but
Mhm.
one part of the river, and almost seemed loyal to that part of the river and their view.
Yeah, and I think that's why he chose them. That's my sense of it too, that he didn't choose, how should I put it, the big names, the famous artists, but more people who were deeply tied to that place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too, yeah. Other thoughts? All right, well, thank you for your attention tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you also, Steve, for setting this all up. So with that, good evening. Yep.